Hello, I'm Jim Cornwall, and this is the WalkingPost.com podcast. WalkingPost.com is the news website dedicated to walking, with all the latest on books, gear, fitness, trails, events, science, festivals, and more. Before we start this week, just a reminder about the special offer for podcast listeners of 15% off at 8000kicks.com on their shoes, boots, backpacks and other accessories. Just enter Walking Post 15 at checkout. This podcast is number 20 and it's going out on July the 18th. And July the 18th is Black Leaders Awareness Day. It's Mandela Day. It's also World Listening Day, so I guess this podcast counts. And it's also Sour Candy Day. I'm not sure if there's any connection between sour and this podcast, but if there is, we'll leave it alone. It would have been Nelson Mandela's birthday today, and it is Richard Branson's birthday. And happy birthday if it's your special day. We did manage to get some walking in and some filming this week. It started out dull and we then got sunburned when the sun came out. Everyone seemed to be at the beach that we walked by, and the very next day people were warned not to go in the water there because of fecal bacteria. It was not us. We did meet a few friendly dogs, including Cindy, if she's listening. It was a bit embarrassing because after chatting we strode off and then we did some filming, so they overtook us and we had to pass the same people about 5 times as we kept stopping to film. I also managed to drop my phone and in a remarkable turning back the years move, managed to kick it into the air and catch it. Maybe that was worse than having it hit the path, but it seems to be okay. My computer also had a bit of an allergic reaction to all the files that I was uploading, so I spent most of yesterday trying to fix that. So that was the exciting week that was. Okay, let's try and remember who was on the podcast last week. Not that it's a test for you, it's definitely a test for me. We had conversations with author Bill Laws about his latest book, A Ramble Through the History of Walking, and the other guest was Vivian McCarthy, Director of African Travel Specialists, Acacia is Africa. Our conversations this week are another book launch, and this one is about women and trails, and the other one is about filter water bottles. But of course, first we do take a quick look at some of this week's article headlines from WalkingPost.com. If you do have news, guest ideas, or even subjects to cover, or comments, or if you want to advertise or sponsor the podcast, please do get in touch via walkingpost.com, or you can just email me at jim@walkingpost.com. So it's time for our almost brief recap of some of the headlines of the news articles we had on Walking Post this past week, and it's a bit more brief than usual because it's the time of year when there's just less news. However, there are still some interesting articles, not that I'm biased. Exodus Adventure Travels is pushing its Portugal portfolio. Lots of alliteration there. The HX Foundation handed out awards, and the world's first universal travel adapter powers up to 8 devices and it works in more than 200 countries. There's nothing worse than getting to a country where you think you're going to be okay and have something not work. Switzerland's adapters are slightly different and that threw me off, but my most spectacular power fail was running a training course in Thailand once, getting everything prepared. The participants arrived, I plugged in the projector and it blew up. And I mean, it didn't just fizz and pop, it actually exploded. Great way to make a first impression. Back to the news. History is coming to life in Bridgetown with a new Tales Trail, and that's the one in Staffordshire, not Barbados. The first phase of the Rothrock State Forest's Musser Gap Trail opened, and that's in Pennsylvania, and the Trans-Canada Trail is challenging the people of Canada to combine to walk the equivalent of the length of the trail, which is 30,000 kilometres, in 30 days. Sadly, I can't take part as you have to do it in Canada, but I did work out that if every Canadian participated, each one would have to walk about 3 centimetres a day. Now that is doable. I'd even pitch in for a couple of babies that can't walk to help out. Anyway, you can read all of these and more at walkingpost.com. So let's move to the interviews. For the first one, we're still using the gold mine that was the outdoor show in Liverpool in whatever month it was. June, I think. One company that was there is a company that makes water bottles with a filter in them so you can drink water from pretty much anywhere. It's an American company called Grayl, and that's Grayl, and you can buy their bottles and filters pretty much everywhere. We had a chance to chat with one of the company's co-founders, Travis Merrigan, in Washington State. And of course, first I asked him about the company.
Well, we founded Grayl about 13 years ago, and with the goal of changing the way that people make water. One of the biggest challenges with making water through a filter is that you have to create force to push water across whatever the media is that's standing between the dirty water and the clean side. And so you can suck through a straw and you can squeeze it with your hands, but those are tiny little muscles. We created a way to press water across that membrane using your body weight. You fill up the outer, the dirty cup, you put the purifier press inside of the cup, and then using your body weight, you press straight down. It makes water super fast, and also, because it has so much, you're able to generate so much force just with your body weight, we're able to use a much higher level of water treatment. So it's a purifier, not a filter. The difference between those two is whether or not it gets virus. All filters get bacteria and protozoa. Grayl purifiers get virus as well. So it's not just good in places where there's relatively clean streams, but also if you're traveling abroad. Also, we try to make the bottles attractive and have premium materials for nice, great feel and touch. And so, yeah, that's what we set out to do, just make a superior water treatment device for people on the move.
What was the process of developing that? How did you come up with the system?
That's funny. Three of us, so myself, Nancy, and Michael Bargell, we met on a rainy weekend on an island in Washington State out in the Puget Sound. And we just knew we wanted to make this device and didn't quite know how to do it. We sat together for 3 days, and at the end we had the device that we're still selling. The first prototype was actually a kid's toy. Maybe you've seen those squirt guns. They're a long tube, and you stick the nose down in water and you pull back on something and you lift it out and just press the plunger into the tube. And we found that was a very powerful way of shooting water across the room. So how can we use that? That was the initial burst of innovation. But the problem with that is now you have one arm pushing against the other arm. One arm's holding the tube, one arm's pushing the plunger. If you set one end on the ground and now you use your body weight, now you have an immense amount of force with very little effort. And those two things were really the key innovations that allowed us to create that device. And it really all came together on one weekend in February in a little cabin on the beach.
But there were already devices before that. What was it that made you think, well, we want different, better?
Yeah, well, using them. So my two co-founders, they were campers and hikers, and they'd used a lot of devices. I was an international traveler. That was my first passion. And having been these places where, your option is to think maybe you can trust something out of a tap or something out of a homemade filter, or go buy single-use plastic water bottles. And there just was no real good solution. And so we just had this crazy notion that we could develop it, that we could think up the answers. Maybe a little bit of hubris and a lot of hard work. And then we came up with a device. Still, I would say that our very first device was not particularly successful because we still didn't know who our customer was and what the form factor needed to be and what the materials were. So it took 5 years after we launched our first unit to really start seeing positive growth. And because our customers teach us a lot. We had this idea, but customers are smarter than we were. And that's always true. And if you're trying to build a product and sell a product, you have to listen to the customers and you have to see them using it. You have to put your ego down and take the advice that they give you and know how to ask questions and know how to listen to complaints without getting upset about it. It was a long, hard process, and we learned a lot. And I think we're just getting started. I'll tell you this, we have not built our best water treatment device. Our products we're working on right now. We still have a lot of innovation and a lot of really good ideas. I think, I guess customers will tell us whether we're right.
When you're coming up with something like that, though, how do you test it in terms of if you're dealing with bacteria, viruses? You can't just kind of test it and then drink the water and but it's still got all this bad stuff in it. How do you know that it's working?
We try to be good guys. We do an extraordinary amount of third-party testing. We have laboratories that we work with for different impurities, both on the pathogen side, bacteria, protozoa, and virus, and then also on the chemical side. And so when we're doing research and development, you can do a lot of testing just to see how well the device functions. But ultimately, you have to send units to the third-party lab to get tested. And then off of the production line, we test units from every single lot to make sure that they're doing what they promise. And then we have really, really strict standards. We reject product if it's not up to the highest standards. So we try to make every effort to make sure that our customers are protected.
If you were hiking and you wanted to use it in a stream, what do you do? Just kind of unscrew it and scoop out water?
Yeah, that's right. It's got two parts. It's got the outer and it's got the inner purifier press. You separate the two. You stick the cup down in the water. So now you've got 3/4 of a liter of dirty water sitting in a cup. And you put that on the ground. And then the purifier press has the purifier at the bottom and then a clean inner tube with a cap on top. You set the purifier down into the water, and then using your body weight, you press down onto the device. We've got a lot of videos on our website, grayl.com, Grayl.com, where you can get the idea. And the key is your body weight generates just an immense amount of force just by simply leaning down into it, much more than your mouth could suck or your hands could squeeze.
I know the first time that I used a filtration device in Europe, probably didn't even need it anyway, but you're still a little bit nervous about using it, thinking, is this going to work? Are people generally nervous about that first use?
Oh, certainly. I think you'd be silly not to be, especially the dirtier the water is. You're putting a lot of trust in a device to keep you safe. That's true of a lot of gear that you might use, climbing gear, a helmet that you might wear. But in particular, if you're putting water inside of your body or inside the body of your children, knowing that if you get sick, your vacation is done. I would encourage people to seek out whatever device they buy from whatever brand. Make sure it's a reputable brand. Probably don't buy the cheapest version. Try to make sure that brand is doing a good job. Whether it's Grayl or somebody else, it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got other designs coming up. So I guess obviously there's still innovation capable in the field.
Oh, yes, absolutely. A few things are happening. One is that the materials are changing and getting better. Many of the devices that are in use, some of the popular ones are fairly rudimentary, and they have inability to withstand tough conditions. Say it gets cold and it freezes and thaws, for instance, your filter's done. That's an interesting riddle we're trying to figure out, the freeze-thaw cycle. And then always trying to find ways of making the process easier, making the water flow faster, removing different types of chemicals. There's microplastics, there's PFAS, there's lead, there's mercury, there's all kinds of things in the water. And increasingly so as the chemicals that we make and use leach out of landfills and however they get the places where they get. I think that there's a growing consciousness that it's really going to be important to make sure water is clean. And so whether you're at home, whether you're on the move, whether you're traveling, whether you're hiking, having ways of making sure that the water you're ingesting is clean, whether it comes from a river, whether it comes from a spigot, whether it comes from a sink, people are increasingly conscious of that. You'll drink more water in a day than you'll eat food. People spend a lot of time making sure their food is pure, much less time thinking about their water, perhaps, but that may be changing. So yeah, we think that there's a lot of new and interesting products to be built, and we're working hard on it.
And I guess that also probably extends to design, does it? Like coming up with new colors and designs?
Yes, colors, designs, ways that the products interact with your other gear. For instance, we spent some time, Grayl also makes backpacks and hip packs and bottle bags and some of these carry products, and making sure that our products interact well with those products. So you can easily get the bottle in and out of the bag, for instance. Those are definitely things we're working on. We launched not too long ago, we launched a series of titanium, which is very lightweight, has great strength, and then also can be cooked in. So you can take your outer, the thing that you dip in the water, you can take that and you can put it directly into a campfire or onto a camp stove to boil water. So you can make coffee or make tea, you can get dehydrated food. So, how can your purifier function optimally, and what else can it do so that it becomes that key part of your kit that you never leave home without it? We spend a lot of time thinking about that. How do we make sure that nobody leaves on a hike without their Grayl?
Right, and you mentioned the fact that compatibility with other things, your carriers are pretty unique as well.
Yeah, we've just launched a line of backpacks and hip packs that I mentioned, and the idea there, first and foremost, is mini backpacks. The bottle pocket is a mesh thing that hangs off the side. It's a kind of an afterthought. We put that front and center in the design of the pack. How you are able to carry a bottle is really important because you want to have access to it. And you need it to not fall out while you're moving around. And then also you start building those things in, and they become useful for other things like a sleeping roll or like a jacket that you can stick in that same spot. And then also organization. We doubled down on zippers. You open up one of our packs, and inside there's organizational features that allow you to have a place for every single thing. It's a new venture for us. We think we have something pretty cool and special for the right type of person. And now we're in a process of listening to the feedback from the customers and making adjustments to those products. But it's been quite successful, and it's a exciting new venture for us.
Yeah, because there's nothing worse. The two things that you mentioned there, the two things that just drive me insane, is the fact that you can't reach around to get your bottle out of that mesh pocket. And the other one is 9 times out of 10, when you take your backpack off, it pops out. So those are the two things that seem like you've managed to avoid with the carrier that you've created.
Yeah, carrying a water bottle is sort of an afterthought, right? There's a lot of effort put in, weight in the straps and the all of those things, and then they have this 5-cent mesh bag that hangs off the side of the backpack, and we just figured that water is more important than that. Obviously, it's our main business, and finding a place to put a water purifier in your pack that has a dedicated place to be, and more than one, several of them. Also, the hip packs are interesting as well. If you take a look at our hip packs, they have a special dedicated place outside of the hip pack itself to carry a water bottle. And so that just makes the hip pack a lot larger because you don't need to use the space inside of your hip pack to carry a bottle. They're just coming over to Europe now. They should be in England shortly.
Where else are they? Then US and Canada, or?
Yeah, we're distributed all throughout Europe. We're in many of the larger outdoor stores in continental Europe and UK. We sell in Japan and sell in Australia, Canada, the United States. We're in about 15 countries, and then you can find us online as well. We really try to support our retailers. We encourage folks to go out and support brick and mortar retail because, you can get stuff online, but it's these little stores that have the knowledge base, and they know the local trails, and they can give you advice, and so you get more than just the product. You support the community, and you support these small businesses, and I think you get more than you pay for when you walk into a small brick and mortar store on High Street.
Do you need to replace parts or filters, and if so, how often?
Right, inside of the bottle, it's got a replaceable cartridge, and the cartridge is good for about 300 uses, so that's about 350 liters of water. And you know when it's time to replace the cartridge because it gets harder to press. Your first press will be 8 or 10 seconds. By the time that press time increases to 25 seconds or so, it's ready to replace. It's keeping your water safe the entire press, but it's just getting slower as the slots fill up with impurities. And so there's a feedback mechanism inside of the cartridge that tells you when it's time to change.
Are they easy to find?
Every place we sell them, the retailers are required to carry replacement cartridges if they're going to carry our bottles. So they're in all those stores, and then all the places that you shop online, including the Grayl websites all over the world, and then Amazon, and of course the brick and mortar retailers.
And you mentioned the backpacks. What other products do you have or are in the works?
Right now we're focusing on those two. There's a few accessories. We have a camp stove that matches with our titanium bottle, so you can cook right on that camp stove. It's quite efficient. But we're focused on the products we do the best. We're not trying to make a wide range of stuff. We have the water purifiers, we have the backpacks, and then we've got a small range of stainless steel bottles as well.
I would imagine that with all the natural disasters that seem to be increasing around the world, this would be useful for rescue teams and for inaccessible places.
Absolutely. We partner with a range of rescue organizations. One's called All Hands and Hearts that goes directly to places that are impacted by natural disasters or hurricanes and floods and wars and things, and are able to provide water for small groups of people. A single Grayl purifier can provide water for 4 people quite easily. And so it really has a multiplier effect. Up to now, we've been using it as sort of the helper model. So if someone goes over, a doctor, an aid worker, a rescue worker goes over, they're able to take care of their own resources so they can stay healthy, and so that they don't draw on resources that the people need. Some of the future product development we're looking at, it might be able to serve larger groups of people. You imagine a field hospital and the needs that they would have for several gallons a minute, for instance. That is a need that we see out there that I don't see anyone addressing very well. Tragically, when these crises hit, global warming and the disasters that happen all the time all over the world, one of the first major problems is water. The sewer systems break down, water becomes instantly contaminated, and then on top of what all the other challenges, people are getting sick because they simply don't have water to drink. It's a huge problem all over the world, including in developed countries, because they can't drink the water that's right at their feet because they don't have the proper tools. It's a hard challenge, and we're working on it.
Well, I mean, just what happened in Texas in the last few days, and you're surrounded by water, but you can't use it. Something that could be fixed, hopefully.
In society, we rely on systems that have been created by experts that work in big buildings downtown to provide this fancy water treatment, and it works perfectly 100% of the time until it doesn't. In which case, people need to think about themselves and think about their families, and what would you do for 72 hours if nothing drinkable came out of the tap? Certainly, people should be looking at personal water treatment for an emergency period of time. There's water filters, there's tablets that you can put into water that sterilize them. Whatever the solution that they choose, be it Grayl or another product, I strongly encourage people to get prepared, because in the United States, they talk about needing to be self-sufficient for 72 hours after crisis. And I don't know about you, I don't keep that much water on hand, especially on a hot day. So having something like a water filter becomes one of the key elements for survival.
Yeah, and I guess it's not just natural disasters. I mean, everything today is so connected to computers that if computers go down, then quite often filtration systems and all of these water pumping systems can easily go down with it. It doesn't have to be a natural disaster. It could just be a computer glitch.
It's not hard to imagine. It's really not. And I think that outdoors people that go hiking and walking, because they are away from all the things that they normally have, I think that they're generally better prepared with first aid kits and compasses and a little bit of food. And so I would think that the audience that you address would be slightly more prepared than most.
If you do need a new bottle, checking out Grayl's selection isn't a bad idea. Of course, it's going to cost you more than a regular water bottle, but the ability to drink cool water from a stream after you've filtered it is very good. It's refreshing, and of course it means you don't have to carry a full water bottle with you, and those generally warm up by the time that you drink from them. And it's also good if you're walking and someone gets injured. Good to have a bottle where you can filter water for people to drink in an emergency. And just like those hemp shoes, we're not on commission. There are quite a few books on walking coming out at the moment. We talked to Bill Laws last week, and we have another one in the works about wayfaring. But this week, it's a book that's been published in the Netherlands. And while it's in Dutch, the premise behind the book is excellent, and hopefully we'll see it in English at some point in the near future. It's about women walking pioneers, and I won't embarrass myself with the Dutch pronunciation, but its English title would be, roughly, The Wild Women's Trail Adventure Walks. It's been written by lecturer, researcher and keen walker Brigitte Ars of the Academy for Tourism at Breda University of Applied Sciences. Maybe first then you could tell me a little bit about what you do there in the Netherlands. And I guess you've got connections to the UK as well.
Yeah, actually, I do. Well, first of all, I love going to the UK because it's a great walking country. I work for Breda University of Applied Sciences. I'm a lecturer and a researcher. And well, I do a lot of things in the field of adventure and what adventure brings to us, the positive effects. And besides working at Breda University, I also have my own platform, which is very much directed at women, called Alice Goes Wild. And this is about women and adventure and adventurous living. I have also an adventurous living podcast. In Dutch is called an Avontuurlijke Leven podcast. And apart from that, I'm an author. I write books. I've done one book on what is adventure actually. It's called Where is the Adventure? That will be the translated title. So it's a quest of adventurous living. And my last book is called Het Wilde Vrouwenpad, The Wild Women Trail, I think you would call it. Adventurous walks. I think that's how you would translate it. Yes.
And I guess that's what we're going to be talking most about today is the new book that you've just published. So I wonder if you could tell me first a bit about what the book is about.
Yes. Well, what I've done is I've walked 12 trails in the footsteps of women. And I started actually in Germany. I started because I was there at walking the Witches' Way, the Hexenstieg, as they call it. And after I walked it, I went to a festival called Walpurgis. It's a bit like Halloween. Yeah, I saw a doll of a witch being burned. And I thought to myself, like, okay, it could have been me because, well, I consider myself an adventurous woman. And I've read quite a bit of things about witches. And I think that if I would have lived in 4 centuries ago, I could have also been burned at stake at that point. Then I went back home, and when I went home, I thought like, oh, wouldn't it be great to do walking ways or walking trails in the footsteps of women? Because I knew a couple of women paths, and I thought there are always strong women, or there's women who have had a big major role in literature or things like that. So I thought that's really interesting to walk in the footsteps of these women. So I was looking for trails which were dedicated to women. So it's not only walking in the footsteps, but existing trails dedicated to women. And it was really, really interesting research because I got to know a lot about the history of women walking, from Dorothy Wordsworth Trail, for example. Also about the Bronte Way. In the beginning, when they wrote their books, they were not even allowed to write under the names of Emily Charlotte and Anne Bronte. And it's all these stories. They were basically all forgotten women, or, well, of course, they're not forgotten, the Bronte sisters, but it took them a long time to get a place in history. So you're basically walking through stories, and that makes it really, really interesting.
At what point did you realize that was going to be a book, or did you kind of realize in advance that you could do this as a book?
I think it was already on my way back from Germany when I went to the Walpurgis night and I saw that doll being burned, and I realized that it could have been me some time ago. I drove back and I thought like, wow, I think if I collect these kind of stories like I done on the Hexenstieg or the Witches' Way in the Harz, in the German Harz, it must be really interesting for a book. And I'd done books before on adventure, and I thought this is really interesting to write a book about. It's about history, it's about stories, it's about women who were sometimes forgotten in history, or they didn't get really a lot of acknowledgement. So I thought it's really interesting to do this and to actually walk these trails. That makes it even better. Because you can write about the women, that's one thing. But if you really walk these trails, then you walk through their lives, through the environment where they have lived. You really get into their lives that way.
A lot of trails are named after places, or they have those kind of boring names like E9 or E2 or
Yeah.
things like that. But what do you think it is that makes long distance trails named after people?
If there's an interesting story behind it, then they are named after people. And I think that is happening more and more, that either they get a certain theme or a story. And I think that's also because storytelling is becoming more and more important for us. People like to be inspired. And if you're doing a trail which is merely a beautiful place, like of course the West Highland Way is a gorgeous trail. I've done that also, the Southwest Coast Path, but people also want to hear the stories behind it, and that makes it maybe even more interesting. And then you can also consider trails that maybe are not going through the most beautiful places, but have very interesting stories behind it. For example, I did a Brigid pilgrimage in Ireland, and it's probably not as beautiful as the Dingle Way or any of the Kerry Way or any of these other famous walking trails. But the stories which you encounter on the way, the people you encounter on the way, makes it very, very interesting. And I see that's something which is coming up. And of course, in the UK, you also have King Arthur Way, the Shakespeare Way. I myself have done the Dorothy Wordsworth Trail. There are trails like that, but you really have to look for them.
And how did you do the research for this? And was it a little bit disappointing to realize that there weren't as many named after women as you'd hoped?
Yes, absolutely. At the end, I did manage to still get quite a few trails, but it took me really some time and a lot of research. And especially when you're doing research in countries like Italy, it becomes even harder because then you have the language problem, of course. At the end, yeah, I managed. What I did see is that there are many more trails which have a man's name. For example, when you talk about pilgrimages, all the pilgrimages are St. James, St. John, St. Kevin. In Ireland, for example, there are 12 male named pilgrimages, while there's only one St. Brigid Way, and that's not even an official pilgrimage. And that's something you see everywhere. It's not only about saints, but it's also about kings and about warriors and about famous people. It's most of it are men. Women are forgotten also when it comes to trails, just like statues or the name of the roads, etc. So it took me quite a bit of time to do this research. But in the meantime, I was walking one trail and then I researched the others. So over time, I did find 12 trails. Yeah.
All right. You already mentioned the Bronte Way, which is maybe the most famous in the UK, named for
Yeah.
women, and then the Dorothy Wordsworth, St. Bridget's in Ireland. What are some of the other ones that you found that you walked? So you mentioned 12.
Yeah, for example, the Via Matildica, that's a very famous one in Italy. Hardly anybody knows that Matildica used to be the countess of the whole of north of Italy in the 11th century. At that time, she had a lot of power and she was befriended with the Pope. And she's the only person who is buried in the Vatican, in the cathedral, along with all the other popes. So that's quite an interesting one. I also found a small trail of Astrid Lindgren. She's the writer of Pippi Longstocking, a very famous child's character. So those are a few which I did. Germany, I did also Nan Shepherd in Scotland. Nan Shepherd talks about the Untrail or the Unpath. So I went along with a Scottish guide and he showed me her Unpath in the Cairngorms, which was also interesting because it's basically, well, you're rambling, you're just walking around, you're not following a straight path because that's not what she did. She was just kind of following her own path, what she thought was interesting. So whatever she was curious about. I did a small Virginia Woolf trail in St. Ives. I thought that was a wonderful trail because St. Ives is just such a beautiful place. It has the beautiful light of the ocean. It was a place where Virginia Woolf was happy. It was very interesting going in her footsteps. So this was a trail from The Guardian. I found it in The Guardian, so that's also something I did. I found it also sometimes at websites. I found one in Paris on Simone de Beauvoir, which was like 7 kilometers, small trail. Also where she lived and where she went to university. And there's Simone de Beauvoir Bridge. And this is from a website from a woman who works at Cambridge University. There's one here in the Netherlands, in the south of Netherlands. We had a small town, and which used to be a place where there were the princesses of Europe were educated, and they were actually, they were like the princesses also of that whole area. So they had a lot of power for 800 years, which is completely exceptional.
Did you find paths that you didn't do or that you're going to do at some point in the future?
Yeah, there's the famous Witches Trail near Lancaster, the Pendle Witch Trail. I would have loved to do that, but I thought I already have done a witch trail, so I thought it's double theme. There are a few more of these saints, female saints, pilgrimages. I didn't want to do too many of the same routes, but there are more besides Brigid. Yeah, apart from that, I haven't seen a lot yet. Yeah, I know there's a small trail on Jane Austen, but that's a very small trail. And I hope there's more coming up. There are more routes coming up. I know that I've seen something in Cambridge, also more like a pilgrimage around female saints. So there's more interest in this topic from what I've seen.
When it came to putting the book together, what approach did you take? Did you go the route of including just the trail and the women that inspired them, or how did you compile each particular walk?
Well, I was really looking for stories because I think basically I'm a storytelling. I also work at the storytelling professorship in Breda University. So I wanted to make it into stories. As an author, I'm also really a storyteller, not a fiction, but a non-fiction storyteller. So it's really trying to discover the story in every trail. That could be anything. And so every trail, every story about every trail is different. And while on the way in basically telling that story, I tell about the women, I tell about certain things about the area. For example, when I talk about Italy, I also have a passage about slow food and slow living in Italy and all these things you discover on the way. So it's like travel journalism. So basically, I'm a travel journalist, and that's how I'm telling the stories also.
What are some of the challenges for women hiking or adventuring?
Yeah, that's a good question. What I hear always is safety. I wonder if that's really true, because I have never had any problem during any of my walks, and I have walked alone, I camped alone, I did wild camping alone. I never had any problem with that. But I know that for a lot of women, well, I think we're all brought up to be careful and to mistrust men on the way. And I find that a pity. But on the other hand, I think, well, if you start walking either with two people or at certain point you walk alone, you discover how friendly people are and that you can trust them. And that also, when you talk about men, there's no reason to distrust them, because most of the people you meet on trails are friendly, helpful, trustworthy. So it gives you a different perspective on people. But I remember there was a very interesting discussion on Instagram and TikTok about women who they rather encounter, a bear or a man. And most of them said we rather encounter a bear than a man. And I found that very shocking, actually, because if you look at the reality, it's so different. I think that's the biggest challenge, because women are always brought up to be so careful and also to be that the world is unsafe, etc. It's great if they go into adventure and if they discover walking and also walking alone, and it gives them a lot of self-confidence and resilience, and it's really good for them.
How do you think that it could be better? How do you think that more women could be encouraged to start? Because I think it's something that once people do start, then they probably would never do one trail. Once you've done one, you want to keep going. So how do you get them out there in the first place, I guess?
Yeah, yeah. Well, what I see from the last 5 years is that it's really coming up. And of course, that also has to do with the book of The Salt Path, for example, that women want to walk more by themselves. And also the Corona crisis, COVID crisis a lot of women started walking during the COVID crisis. So that's something that really changed in the last 5 to 10 years. There's a big surge of women who are going into adventure and adventurous walking compared to 10 years ago. I've done research on this topic, and from what I see, it just gives them so much. It just gives them indeed resilience, self-confidence, the feeling of freedom, the feeling of being in nature, of self-discovery, positive energy, happiness. So it's such a positive thing, and women are realizing this more and more. And in the Netherlands, but I think also in the UK, there's a lot of articles right now on women walking alone or women going on trails, walking on trails. So it is really coming up. And I'm very happy to see that women are discovering adventure. Yeah, a lot of times they are still walking in groups or walking with organizations. But the next step would be maybe go with a friend. And the step after that would be to walk alone.
You mentioned walking groups. I think that might be a good way for people to start, because then they discover people with similar interests or similar backstories. It's probably useful.
It's very useful, yes. Yes, that's also what I recommend women who want to walk for the first time is just either go with a friend who's walked before or go with a group.
Women in adventure, I think it does seem to be, even though it's not where it could or should be, it does seem to be something that more women are doing.
Absolutely, it's absolutely on the rise. There are also figures about that. It's a big surge in women going on adventures, also solo adventures. It's a big thing amongst women. So yes, absolutely. It's definitely on the rise.
Do you think that's a lot of that is social media? They see other women doing the same kind of things on TikTok or Instagram or whatever, and then think, well, I want to do that as well.
Yeah, it's definitely also the social media. I think it's also the time we live in. There's much more in the bigger picture, the context. It's more normal for women to go their own way, which was not the case maybe 30 years ago. That as a woman you choose to walk your own trail. And now it's much more normal to do that. It also has to do with the context, with the way the society is changing. But social media definitely has a big influence on that.
People are a little more aware of things like mental health now, and also the fitness and mental health benefits of walking.
Right. Yeah, you see that we live in a society where, yeah, a lot of people have a burnout or mental problems. And anyway, adventure and also walking adventures is a way to tackle mental problems. I think in the UK it's even, or I'm quite sure that that's what I heard from Belinda Kirk, who set up the conference Adventure Mind, organization Adventure Mind. She wrote a great book about this, Adventure Revolution. And they even use it as a social prescription. So instead of taking drugs against fears or traumas and sometimes even depressions, they use adventure as, doesn't mean that it needs to be a big adventure, but can be very small. But they use adventure against these mental problems. So that's coming up more and more.
Your book is available now and it's in Dutch currently. Are there plans to get it into other languages? Because it seems like it would be universally appreciated.
Yeah, well, it's doing very well in the Netherlands. And right now we are looking at the possibility of translating it. I'm working through a literary agent, and yeah, I hope that the literary agent can indeed pitch it to a publisher in the UK so it can get translated. It would be very interesting, I think, because there's actually 4 in the UK, Scotland, 1 in Ireland. So a big part of it is in English language territory. I think it's also important if it would get translated, because it's not only the story of women walking and why women should walk and why We couldn't walk for such a long time because that's what the Dorothy Wordsworth story is about, that we were not even allowed to walk, not for fun, but we could only walk for going to work. And that has changed completely. So there's all these stories are also interwoven in the book. It's more than just a travel story. It's a story about women who have not been seen, but also about the power women have to choose their own path. And it inspires women also to choose their own path.
I really hope that book makes it into English. It's definitely the kind of book that would do really well, so keep an eye out for it. Anyway, as and when it happens, I'm sure we'll be able to bring you all the details. Anyway, that's it for another podcast. If you have news or suggestions for podcast guests, please do get in touch through jim@walkingpost.com. Looks like being a wet weekend and a wet week here as we hurtle towards August. And the nights are getting a little bit longer too. So I hope you enjoyed this week's walkingpost.com podcast, and I hope you have a great week, hopefully with a walk somewhere, even if it is with an umbrella. So until next time, happy trails! Walking Post from walkingpost.com is an Air Coastal Media Limited production.